Lee River, the work we did in London, that Louise did, and the connection of that with the Thames, and then Helen's talk now about her pilgrimage along the Thames. There seems to be quite a riverine theme to this conference. And Epoh also was, I think we're going to hear in a minute, brought up by the Thames, as was I, in fact. So there's a real connection. Epoh's done some very, very beautiful paintings, which I'm sure you're going to see, and is fascinated by the Thames and the Rhine. And she's going to talk to us about the marriage of the Thames and the Rhine. Epoh Beech.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Can you hear me? Yeah? Just talk. Okay. Right, I would just like to start by saying thank you to Helen for your beautiful talk. And for those of you who weren't here, Helen talked about her experience walking along the Thames, and it very much connects with what I'm about to talk about. And I'm going to be talking this afternoon about my love of the Thames and the Rhine, and how both these rivers have greatly inspired me and influenced my artwork over the years. Firstly, I'm going to show you images of the actual rivers themselves and the walking journeys I've made. And then I'll show you the images of the artwork I've made as a result. And then finishing with showing you the hand-drawn animation, the marriage of the Thames and the Rhine. And there'll be time at the end. If any of you have any questions, I'd be delighted to answer if I possibly can. So, the Thames and the Rhine. Here they are. My little pointy stick. And there. And are both a vital part of my life. The Thames I've known since childhood. And since 2004, I've made many trips to the Rhine. And I'd like to share with you some of the edited highlights of these experiences. The artworks I've made are not a visual representation, but they're an imaginative response to the experience of being with and listening to the rivers, absorbing their sounds and energy and observing their changing colours. And I found that over time that the rivers have provided me with a conduit for my imagination to time travel in, and are for me a link to the spirit of place, the natural world, to its history and to its culture. And in turn, my thoughts and senses have been shaped, changed and enriched by the experience of these wonderful watery worlds. And it's been like getting to know two wise old friends that exist in a different time zone. When I'm by the river, I become detached from the mundane world. The world becomes more remote, and it's as if passing from land to water, I've crossed some invisible boundary. Connecting two different rivers together has been a theme of my work for quite a long time, and this desire to join two rivers in my imagination is symbolic of my wish to understand the history surrounding the rivers, but most importantly to understand the actual rivers themselves. And this work with the Thames and the Rhine started many years before I found out, to my surprise, that the Thames and the Rhine, before the end of the last ice age, 10,000 years ago, were actually one big river. And the Thames was a tributary tributary of the Rhine. Thank you. And this is obviously at Doggerland there, where they join what is now the North Sea, as you can see from this image here. And from here you can see where the old valley of the Thames and the Rhine would actually be. Both these images are stills from my animation, the marriage of the Thames and the Rhine. And I find this really amazing, and it really captured my imagination, knowing that somewhere beneath the North Sea these valleys still exist, buried in the water. And I felt, because of this was very apt. This is a quote from Peter Ackroyd's Thames, Sacred River. Time has a curious presence upon the river. The Thames does not live in human time, it lives in geological time. I live and work in London, so the Thames is always there, and this is obviously, Thames in London. And the Thames has been my one constant presence in my life. It's always been there through dark times and good times. And I think of the river as a dear friend and a source of comfort and peace. This here is a detailed map of the Thames, and this here, Cricklade, is where I was brought up and spent my early childhood in this house here. And this is the Thames. It was the end of the field of the house, and my sister and I played almost every day in the river, letting our imaginations run free, creating whole imaginary worlds, and it was a source of pure joy. And this is where my love of the river began. And from here, from this house, we moved to Ewan, which is very close to the source of the river that you mentioned earlier. And although the river here was only a few feet wide, it was still there, still nearby. And then a few fields away from this bit of the river is the source of the Thames. And this is in a field called Chewsbury Mead. And although for hundreds of years it's been a sacred place, it appears not a very significant beginning to a river that holds such importance in the collective consciousness of the country. And this stone is the stone that marks the source of the river. And this is the ash tree. And there is very often no water here at all, and it becomes a bit of a river, like Helen explained, a few fields down.
Is it a spring?
I'm not sure. I think it is a spring. Yes. Yeah. Is it? Yes. And then it creeps through Ewan, and then it goes to onto Lechlade, and this is between Cricklade and Lechlade. It's a very beautiful part of the river. And then this is Lechlade here. And that's the beautiful church in Lechlade. And then from Lechlade it goes on to Duxford. And this is a very quiet part of the river. And then it runs through Oxford and then on to Abingdon. And it's just after here, isn't it? That's joined by the Thames, and they become one. Thames and the Isis become one river. And that's the Goring Gap, which I think is an exceptionally beautiful part of the river. And it then runs through Reading, which is actually rather beautiful. And that's Temple Island, Henley on Thames. And then the river goes on to London. And this is Hammersmith, and that's Putney Bridge. And as an adult, I moved to London, and the river was there too. So the river has very much been with me all my life. But it was when I had a studio, actually here, if I point, just there, by the river. And this is the building here, the Palace Wharf. I had a studio here between 95 and 99, and it was really then that I became conscious of the importance of the Thames in my life. It was my link home and connected to all the places I loved. It held in its water all my childhood memories, the memories of my parents, my ancestors. It felt like a liquid history. And I would sit on the terrace of the studio for hours, thinking, not working, watching the tide and the bird life. And over time, I came to sense a connection in the pattern of the tide and my thinking. It had a really strong effect on my mood. And at this time, I also became very interested in Elizabethan and Jacobean literature and philosophy. It was a source of inspiration to my artwork, and I painted quite a few paintings illustrating different works. I was particularly inspired by the work of Sir Francis Bacon and the poetry and writing of Sir Philip Sidney, of Ben Jonson and Edmund Spenser, and I spent much time at the Globe Theatre, situated on the Thames. And this picture here was painted at this studio in '98, and it's an oil painting, and it's dedicated to Sir Francis Bacon and his elder brother Anthony Bacon, as two swans flying over the Thames, flying over my studio, actually. And there's the Globe Theatre and St Paul's Cathedral. And I think that's supposed to be the Houses of Parliament, but doesn't really look much like them. So that was that. And from 96 to 99, I walked the length of the Thames, following the Thames path. Every weekend for a few months or so it took about 4 years. And we started at the source, and then it finished at the Thames barrier. And today I continue to walk sections of the river, sometimes on my own, sometimes with friends, but I always take flowers, usually roses, for the river. I go to the river to give flowers to commemorate days of significance, or to think of friends and family, past and present, as a form of prayer. To me, it holds immense meaning, watching flowers go towards the sea when thinking of a person and giving thanks for their life. And this extract from T.S. Eliot's 4 quartets I really love. I do not know much about gods, but I think that the river is a strong brown god. The river is within us. The sea is all about us. I feel that the Thames is part of me, part of my psyche. And this love of the Thames River has led me to relate to other rivers, to try to understand the complexity of their character and the different ways of being and communicating with them, and mostly to thank them for all that they give us. So, possibly with this in mind, I had a very vivid dream about the Rhine. I'd never really thought about the Rhine before, but I had, in the dream, I could see the whole of the Rhine, and I could see a map and its source, and I felt very strongly that I needed to go to the source of the Rhine. And on the map that I could see, it was written River Rhine. It was spelled Rwine, and the river was flowing with red wine. And I knew this dream was of huge significance to me. And I wanted somehow to connect the Thames and the Rhine together. So I wanted to go to Oxford. I felt very strongly I wanted to. I can't remember quite why. I just felt this pull to go to Oxford to collect some Thames water in a little jam jar before leaving for Switzerland. And so I went to Oxford to collect some water, and then I travelled by car to the source of the Rhine. It has two possible sources. That's the Rhine source, and that's the Rhine. And I chose to go to the Rhine, which is it's the most popular. I don't know if it's established, but it's certainly the most popular source of the Rhine. And the two rivers join together at a place called Rhine, just in front of Caen there. And this is telling you that it's 1,320 kilometres to the estuary. And that is at the Rhine there. And this is the source of the Rhine. It's a glacier lake. It's still, green, calm and majestic. It's set in beautiful mountains with endless snow-covered peaks standing nearby, although you can't see them in that image. Very different from the quiet source of the Thames. And it felt very moving thinking of the history that this river has witnessed, and that this great European river started right here. I poured the water from the Thames and from Oxford into the source of the Rhine to join the two rivers together. And this action of pouring water into the Rhine from the Thames inspired me to collect Rhine river water in bottles from each place I stopped at. And I labelled and dated each bottle, and then I was going to take it home. And this is a place called Trun, which is very close to the source. And here the water is incredibly fast flowing, and it's minty green, and it feels very fresh. And then it goes on to this place called Elance, and it's still very young at this stage, and it's got a wonderful, I don't know if anyone's been there, but it's got an amazing feel to it. And this is where the two Rhines, the Rhine and the Rhine, is where they join at Caen, just before Caen.
How do you spell that?
Chur. And this is Lake Constance or Bodensee. And this borders Austria, Germany and Switzerland. And it is incredibly beautiful and incredibly peaceful. And it's like this vast expanse of pale blue water that just feels so open-hearted and still. And it's a little island, although it's joined by a road, like an island, in Lake Constance. And this was my first experience of Germany. The first time I'd seen a memorial for the last war in Germany. I hadn't ever really thought about what it would be like being German during the last war, or how difficult it might have been. But here, in this beautiful, peaceful place, I found it very easy to imagine. And this moment had a very powerful effect on me, and started my love affair with Germany and the Rhine, and my desire, my really deep desire to celebrate all the beauty of the German landscape, culture and its people. And then from there, from Rhine Island, went to Stein am Rhine. I was continuing to collect water from each different place, still not sure what I was going to do with it. And the car was filling up fast with bottles. And I was becoming increasingly interested in the surface colour of the water and its appearance. And the colour changed so frequently, it became very apparent. It was a very physical response to the river. So this is Stein am Rhine. And then from there, went to Schaffhausen, and the water becomes much darker green here. And this is just before the Rhine falls, and you can begin to feel there's a bit of excitement in the water. Something's about to happen. And this here is a close-up of the Rhine falls. And when I saw it, there were loads of tourists there, and it was midday. But it had a really great power. It really was a wonderful thing to experience, and I won't forget it. And then from there, the river does a curious thing. This is an aerial view, and the Rhine falls are just sort of here.
Which country? They're in Germany, are they?
This is actually Switzerland here, and that's Germany. It's
Right.
pretty much the border the whole way along. And so this is a place called Rhino, and the river, as you can see, does a big loop. It forms an eye, and the colour of the water here was really dark blue, and really very unusual. And there at this place here at Rhino is Rhino Abbey, and it became a psychiatric hospital in the 19th century, and then in 2000 it was empty, and it had been empty for 4 years when I was there, and it felt really quite spooky. There were some artists, some Steiner artists working there, but it felt like it needed a bit of love. And from there, the river forms. Oh, this is a place called Flach. Flach, yeah, and it provides the border from Flach to Basel. The river provides the border between northern Switzerland and southern Germany, and the whole way along it's incredibly fast-flowing and green and playful, I think. And people swim in it the whole time, and it's really, really fast. And as you can see, there are people swimming there. And as I walked along the river, I could see endless sort of wonderful bits of green reflected into the water. And it's very, very verdant and forested the whole way along this section of the river. And so the water is the most wonderful colour, and it is this wonderful dark green. And there are also lots of pillboxes, defence pillboxes, I think is the right term, left over from the last war, which I was surprised to see, and they're a reminder of the darker side. So from there, I went to Basel, and Basel, the river is paler green and still fast flowing, and lots of people swim in the river in Basel. They swim. They swim. I don't know if you can see, but that they are all people swimming. And what you do, you can buy these orange bags, and you can buy them anywhere along the bank of the river. And you put your clothes into the bag, and then you jump in the water, and you don't really need to swim because the current is so fast. You literally just sort of float. and then you get out, and it's so well organised because you have these wonderful hot showers on the bank. So you just have a hot shower, and then you put your clothes on, and then off you go. And so that's Basel, and I have swum in the river there many times, and I thoroughly recommend it. It's wonderful. And the river turns directly north from Basel. For the first time, it makes a sharp turning north. And this marks the end of the Swiss Rhine, and pretty much the end of the river as a carefree river, providing joy to its inhabitants of its banks. and when I this is the end of my journey, actually, this section, and I, with all my bottles of water, returned home. So that was my first visit to the Rhine. And as a result of this journey, I painted 36 large watercolours, all in sequence, all describing the surface colour of the river along its journey from the source in the Alps to Basel. In 6 weeks, I painted all of the work. Each work was painted with Rhine water from the specific place. And it was like following a stream of consciousness in me, like following the river within myself. I'd start with a large piece of watercolour paper, about a metre, a metre by 70 centimetres, and I'd pour the river water on the paper and let it sink in, and then I'd put colour pigment on the paper that I felt best describe the surface of the river that I was thinking about. And this here is the source of the Rhine, and I painted it black because I saw a lot of darkness at the source in the water, so I imagined adding some colour to it and to try and lighten the dark. And then this was Trun, this is near the source of the Rhine, where the river is fast flowing and mint green blue and very fresh. And then it goes on to Chor. This is where the two Rhines meet, and it becomes one big river. And the colour of the water here is very sort of deep turquoise. And then from Chor, this is Schaffhausen, just before the Rhine falls. Oh, no, sorry, it's Lake Constance. It's Lake Constance, which I painted on a large piece of paper because I was trying to capture the vast pale blue stillness of this beautiful, beautiful lake. And yeah, and this is Schaffhausen. Painted. This is Schaffhausen in moonlight. I was staying in a campsite just outside Schaffhausen, and I was just sitting and watching the river in the moonlight on the river, and it was this wonderful emerald green. I'd never seen anything like it, and it was very hard to capture it, but I tried to. And then this here is Rhine, where the river does this big loop, and it was very blue. And this is where the psychiatric hospital was, and Rhine Abbey. And then this next piece is Basel, and again this was a large piece. It was 150 centimetres by a metre, so pretty big. And I painted the top paler than the bottom because I wanted to take the viewer's gaze north, because that's where the river is heading. And these works were all exhibited in London in 2004. And that was the end of the first Rhine journey. The following year, I travelled to the Rhine twice. In total, so going from Basel, which is here, that's Basel, to Cologne, which is here. And then this shows, this is the Upper Rhine detail, which is basically from Basel to just north of Strasbourg. And then here is Basel. This is my second visit. And I felt very conscious that returning to the same place, the river felt very different. I felt very different. It was a very different experience. And I felt that this poem, written in 500 BC, by Heraclitus of Ephesus, seemed to sum up the essence of this experience. You cannot step twice into the same river, for other waters are continually flowing in. And then it goes on. It is impossible to step into the same river twice. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. From Basel, the river heading north towards the sea changes character dramatically. It's been straightened by 19th century German engineering to become an efficient workhorse, and it's wide and muddy brown, and it has barges storming up and down the river, and the river seems to have changed in character from being a hard-working to being a hard-working adult. And the journey of the life of a river as a journey from life to death seems very apparent at this stage. It really seems to have lost all that early playfulness, and it's all about hard work. And whilst this is a bit of the river which is just north of a town called Breisach, which is between Basel and Strasbourg. And whilst I was walking here, I was beginning to engage in the history of the river and the suffering it had witnessed, and not just the surface colour and the surrounding landscape, but I imagine the water carrying all the pain of the past. I thought a lot about the French Revolution, the loss of the fleur-de-lis. It fell from favour as a national emblem along with the King of France. And here I saw our army dressed in Napoleonic uniforms standing on the banks of the river with their horses. I could hear their bridles clattering and see shining guns with them, and see soldiers from the French Revolution and soldiers in modern day uniform and soldiers trapped screaming in the water. And I became, this is a photograph of the bed of the Rhine. I became very interested in what lay on the surface of the river, the actual riverbed, and what bones might lie there. And my imagination was taken back in time to underneath the surface, to the invisible, and to the river's memory. And I painted this picture. This was called I called it the soldier. It was to remember all soldiers who died fighting by the Rhine and all the blood that has been spilled in the water. And these were large watercolours like before. And this image is that I imagine the colour of the riverbed at Basel. I imagine dark matter being mixed with colour to release the darkness that I had seen on the riverbed in my imagination. And then this image is how I imagined the riverbed to be at Strasbourg. And the purple is for the iris flowers, one of the origins of the fleur-de-lis, and to me a symbol of great beauty. And so on the river runs. And the next section I would like to mention is the romantic Rhine, or the middle Rhine. And I travelled on down the river just north of Strasbourg and walked from Worms to Cologne in 2 weeks, mainly high above the river and in forests. And I made a small detour to Heidelberg, which I hope you can see there. Heidelberg is a very beautiful town, which is it's on the Neckar River. It's a tributary of the Rhine. It also has a historical connection with England and the Thames. And I'd read about this English connection in Patrick Leigh Fermor's Time of Gifts, and Peter Dawkins's The Shakespeare Enigma, and Francis Yates's The Rosicrucian Enlightenment, and Bernard Levin's To the End of the Rhine. So I realised it was of consequence. And this connection was Princess Elizabeth Stuart and Frederick V, the Elector Palatine in the Rhineland. And they married in 1613. And for their wedding celebration, Francis Beaumont wrote a masque, which is like a pageant, called The Masque of the Inner Temple and Gray's Inn, the Marriage of the Thames and the Rhine. It's a symbolic title. Elizabeth is the Thames, Frederick is the Rhine. And their wedding came with great political hopes for the friendship of Germany and England. And it links the Thames and the Rhine historically. And Patrick Leigh Fermor describes Elizabeth in his book A Time of Gifts as she arrived in Heidelberg as a bride of 17, and for her reign of 5 years, Heidelberg had never seen anything like the masques, the revels, and the balls. She was preoccupied with the layout of palace gardens, with devices like talking statues, singing fountains, water organs, and the like. She had grown up among the plays of Shakespeare and Ben Jonson and the conceits of Donne, and played in the masques where the scenery was designed by Inigo Jones. She was celebrated as the Queen of Hearts by a galaxy of champions. So this section of the river, the romantic Rhine, from Worms to Cologne, is full of castles and legends and knights, dragons, swan knights, sirens, and the water is deep and dark and surrounded by high forested hills and vineyards that cling to the bank. And the legends and music are a big part of the landscape here. The Lorelei, a beautiful nymph who sits high on the rock and lures sailors to their death by distracting them so they sink their ships. And there's Siegfried, the dragon-slaying hero of the Nibelungenlied, which is a 13th century German epic poem. Siegfried is found celebrated all the way along this section of the Rhine, and he's also the hero of Wagner's Ring and the Ring of the Nibelung. And the German people are incredibly proud of these myths, and I found that virtually every hotel we went into, there was Siegfried's image or his sword or his shield. So they're very much alive. And this is a Boppard, and Wagner was very inspired by the Rhine. The Ring cycle begins with the Rhine maidens on the bed of the Rhine guarding their gold, and it ends when the lost gold is returned to the river and the river floods. And in his opera Lohengrin, which is based on the legends of the Swan Knight, associated with the town of Kleve, which is near the Rhine but higher up. And in this legend, the Swan Knight is an anonymous heroic figure who appears from the river pulled by a swan, on a boat pulled by a swan. And many other artists and composers from the Romantic movement have been inspired by the Middle Rhine. Beethoven, Schumann, Mendelssohn, Turner. And I found that by walking by the river and through the forests, the sheer force of nature had an enormous power on my imagination. I was thinking about moonlight, underwater, darkness, what lies beneath, the collective unconscious, mythological stories, Wagner, images held in time in the river. And I developed a love of Wagner's music. It felt as if the water was unleashing vast rooms in my mind to travel in. Its history, its stories, and the collective mythology of the German people, and the wars and the romances. It's an amazing section of the river. And this journey came to an end in Cologne. And from here I returned home, and it took a while to process all I had experienced. In fact, it was a year. I was on my way back to London in my car from Berlin. I was on an arts residency in Berlin, and I was driving back, and I knew I wanted to stop in Xanten, which you can probably see there, and mainly because I just like the look of its name, and it sort of jumped out at me. And Xanten's a small but significant town because it has a large cathedral, but it's famous in Germany for being where Siegfried the dragon slayer was born, and it's near to Kleve, which is associated with the swans and the swan knights. So they're very connected. And then this is Sir Philip Sidney, for those of you who don't know him. And I've been very interested in Philip Sidney, the man, his poetry and writing for some time, and his love of the imagination and of nature I find very moving. I went to Zutphen and Arnhem to commemorate his death, because he died in Arnhem. Died in Arnhem, having been wounded at the Battle of Zutphen in 1586 when he was 31. So, and then his body was returned to St Paul's Cathedral from the Arnhem and the Rhine back to the Thames. So when I returned home, and after quite a few months of staring into space in my studio again, a river of images flooded through my mind, all in black and white. And I knew I wanted to make a hand-drawn animation. There was too much information to draw in one image at a time. The drawings needed to move or to flow. So I started doing the drawings, and I made the drawings using charcoal on paper. The charcoal had dual purpose. First, it's easy to rub out, and that for animating is very useful. And secondly, it's symbolic of the dark material, or the negredo in alchemy. So that's transforming base matter into gold or light. And so I started to draw hundreds of drawings, and I called this project The Marriage of the Thames and the Rhine. And this, I haven't mentioned before, but this, when I was on my way back from Berlin, I had this sense that I had a white-winged horse in the car with me. And he travelled back with me from Berlin, pretty much. And so the first image that came to my imagination when I started drawing was Pegasus. And I had this sense that with him, he was flying over Xanten from the romantic Rhine, bringing poetry with him and justice and mercy to the Thames from the Rhine. And I thought about the relationship between England and Germany, both geographically and historically. And then I drew, this is a still from my animation, which you will see in a minute. This is the Rhine at Xanten. And these are all quite large drawings. And this is Pegasus rising out of the Rhine at Xanten, just before he's about to start flying, obviously, bringing all that poetic beauty and wisdom with him. He's got a lot of work to do. And in Beaumont's wedding mask for Elizabeth and Frederick, the two main protagonists are Hermes and Iris, and both are messengers who are summoned by Jupiter and Juno to bless the two rivers. And on February the 16th, 1613, the mask was performed by lawyers from the Inner Temple and Gray's Inn on the banks of the River Thames at Whitehall Palace and on the river in barges. The stage sets were designed by Inigo Jones, and it was an extravagant and beautiful and spectacular event. And the Inner Temple is, not sure where it is, it's there. Oh, can you see? There. And it's located on the edge of the city. And this is a the view of it from the road. And I went to visit the inner temple to research for my project, the marriage of the Thames and the Rhine. And I knew that Pegasus was a symbol of justice, wisdom, and a source of inspiration to the poets. But I hadn't realised that Pegasus also has a long history of being associated with the inner temple. And I found this really amazing. And Pegasus is everywhere at the inner temple. Way beyond what's necessary. He's on the gates to start with. He's on the shields. That's by the Thames. He's on plaques there and there. He's on drain pipes, letter headings, coats of arms, library windows, and here he is again. He's in books and on railings. You really can't miss him. And I have so many times. The thought, when I was researching as to why, there isn't much about it apart from the fact that it's sort of been an emblem since the 16th century, and it's not known for certain why, but it's suggested that it was in honour of the Earl of Leicester, Queen Elizabeth's favourite, and Philip Sidney's uncle, who, along with his cohorts, used Pegasus as a symbol, and that's supposed to be the origin. Then may I introduce this? I had a very vivid dream about a seal going down to the bottom of the sea, or a large frozen lake, and he was wearing a camera around his neck and was going down to the seabed to record something. And this had a profound impact on me, and I thought how this seal could be like a guide to the underworld, like an Orphic figure. And when I decided to reimagine Beaumont's mask very loosely, I thought using the seal from my dream as a guide to go back in time, he could go and find the old Thames and Rhine Valley sunk beneath the waves of the North Sea. So he's on a mission. And here he is on an iceberg, waiting to get the call. That's Doggerland, by the way, which you'll see in a minute. And there he is, he's on his way down to find the old Thames and Rhine Valley. And here he is. Here I was imagining the old Thames and Rhine Valley still being there. It's still there. That's what amazes me. And this is, these are all stills from the animation. And this is Elizabeth and Frederick on the Thames by Inner Temple, getting married, or just holding hands, I'm not sure. It felt that by weaving different threads into the animation's narrative, some symbolic, some historical, some geographical, and some personal, was reflective of the moving water in the river. Possibly hard to grasp in one go, but seeing something different each time you look. All those images, to me, were held invisibly in the river's memory, held in one moment and at the same time collected in the water and still moving forward to the sea, like dust being lost in light. And as part of this project, I drew 20 smaller works, all connected to Wagner's Ring Cycle, Lohengrin, the myths surrounding the Rhine, the Lorelei, Siegfried and the Swan Knights of Clever. And here are 4 examples. This is the Lorelei in Moonlight, and this is Siegfried. Siegfried by the Rhine, and in moonlight. This is a swan night, arriving on the Thames from Claver. And then this, of course, is Pegasus arriving in London. And the Marriage of the Thames and the Rhine project work started in 2007. Took me 3 years to complete the project, and it was exhibited in Shoreditch in 2010. And the animation was shown at film festivals internationally. And now I'm going to show you The Marriage of the Thames and the Rhine, the animation, and I hope you enjoy it. I'll finish this. You can start again if you like. Hang on, where are we? Okay, can we turn the lights off? Is that possible? Yeah. uh, okay. So. So now to the Mask of Blackness. I'm now working on another animation called The Mask of Blackness, which is a sequel to the marriage of the Thames and the Rhine. And I've received some funding from Kensington Chelsea Council for this project. And the work is similar in style to the last animation, and it's based on Ben Jonson's The Dark on Their Heels or Tails. And I'm due to return to the Rhine again next year on an arts residency in an older watchtower on the Dutch-Rhine border, Dutch-German border, I mean, as I still haven't reached the sea. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was such an inspiring journey. Really beautiful, and I'm sure we've all been uplifted. It's once again, we've been taken on this extraordinary journey through your life and across the channel and under the channel, indeed. So thank you very much, Epoh. That's lovely. So it's.